Hello, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've seen Matilda the Musical.
Yes.
In the cinema. The complete title is Roald Dahl's Matilda the Musical. It's Matilda the Musical.
Before you start, I want to complain about Cineworld. This is our second visit in 2 days to Cineworld Broad Street. Yesterday we saw Corsage, and the subtitles were off the screen, and we had to call in to get it changed. They got it changed, but only 10 minutes into the film, not from the beginning of the film.
And they didn't readjust the focus, which they should have, because they zoomed out the image, the focus changed, and it didn't affect the film too much, because it's 35mm, it has a soft look anyway, but they should have fixed it properly. They didn't.
And today, we had to call them to start the film, because the film was meant to start at 4:20, at 20 to 5, there weren't even trailers, there was no light in the cinema, and it was very cold in the cinema. So it was interesting to observe that the hallways were all heated, but the cinema itself was like super cold, which I'm sure is not noticeable if the cinema is packed, but it's very noticeable when it's not so packed. I care less about that, but really, the subtitles, focus, and starting the film are pretty essential, and particularly at a time when cinemas are complaining about getting customers in. Those are really basic, fundamental things that need looking after.
Yeah, today we saw Matilda in Screen 8, and yesterday Corsage was in Screen 10, and Screens 8, 9 and 10 at Cineworld and Broad Street are the ones on the upper floor right at the back. They're the small screens, and they're the ones where you feel like they're not giving a fuck about what's being shown in there. They're small, they're not the IMAX, they're not the bigger screens, and you do feel a bit neglected. I think.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt, and let's go back to the film.
Yes. So we saw Matilda the Musical, which is based on the 2011 stage play, music and lyrics by Tim Minchin, and the book written by Dennis Kelly. This film is directed by the director of that, Matthew Warchus, who you're saying is the director of The Old Vic.
Yep.
And obviously, originally, this is based on the book Matilda by Roald Dahl, which was published in 1988, the year of my birth. And it's funny, we mentioned yesterday, because you said you wanted to see this, and I actually didn't know whether you would be interested in it or not, but I was, because Roald Dahl was a big part of my childhood. So I don't actually remember if I read Matilda. I read lots of his I read his poetry, I read the BFG, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think I read SEO Trot, George's Marvellous Medicine was fucking great, The Witches, I read lots of his books, and Roald Dahl is very well regarded for kind of understanding kids, I think all the best kind of children's authors have a good sense of the fact that kids like kind of quite nasty stuff, like you get the kind of fairy tales and things, and sometimes particularly Disney kind of has this quite idealised view of how kids are happy and lovely and pure and everything, but someone like the Brothers Grimm and someone like Roald Dahl really get that kids like to see their parents getting kind of destroyed and blown up and all that sort of stuff. That's what Roald Dahl's full of. And Matilda is about this young girl. She's older in this than she was in the 1996 film, which was, again, part of my childhood, which was directed by Danny DeVito. She's, 6 years old in that, and here she's sort of 10 or 11. And I think part of that is because she needs to handle much more advanced dialogue and quite complicated lyrics. I don't know how old she was in the book. And it's funny, she's got quite a lot going on in her life, Matilda, right? When I rewatched the 96 one yesterday, and you watched about half of it, and I'm seeing this today, what I was reminded of, it being the first time in some 20 odd years I'd seen it, is how disparate a lot of the strands are. So she's hyper-intelligent, she develops these telekinetic powers, she has a bad home life, she's treated very badly by her parents who didn't want her, she gets a bad school life, she goes to a school where the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, is kind of psychotic and a despot.
And a murderess.
Yes, the spoilers. She has a love of literature, and these are all kind of, there's definitely relationships between them, but it's funny how kind of disparate they are. And I think the 96 film, which it would be unfair to compare it to it too much, but I will have to a bit because I'm so familiar with it and it's, I love it. And it's the other Matilda on screen. That made those strands more coherent and bringing them together. So when she develops her powers in that film, she works very hard to do so, and then she uses them, using her intelligence, to take down Trunchbull in using her knowledge of Trunchbull's family life. It all comes together quite smartly. Here, I felt that the film did a worse job of making those coherent. It felt a little bit more over the place. I think part of that might be because it being a musical, it has less time to develop those things in between the songs, and the songs kind of... okay, go on.
I mean, I just think it's a poor film.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's very poorly directed. I think the child actress at the centre of it is not bad, but she's not appealing. She's not charismatic enough to carry a musical.
Alicia Ware, her name is.
I think they've made really terrible choices throughout. Looking at the first 40 minutes or so, which I saw of the Danny DeVito film, you think, this is someone who knows about cinema. I mean, he might not be one of the greatest directors, but the film had a look and a style and, whereas actually this is just a complete fizzle visually. It tries to integrate the choreography and to make the choreography visual, but actually that has very little impact. And it does things that to me just kind of almost like, don't quite make sense. So, why have Emma Thompson, be at the center of this and make her almost unrecognizable, except through her voice. So I think kind of, visually, musically, and dramatically, it's just a fizzle.
Musically is interesting. It won the Olivier for Best New Musical, and it was nominated for the Tony for the lyrics. It won for the book. I really like the songs and lyrics in this. I've listened to the soundtrack before, so I was already familiar with the musical to a degree before we saw the film as well, because I got the soundtrack and I listened to it in the car, and I knew some of the songs. Some of them I actually don't care about all that much. So there's songs with Miss Honey, where she sings about her home life, and there was a whole thing about the story that Matilda's writing, which, again, don't know if it was there in the Roald Dahl book. It certainly wasn't there in the 96 film, that Matilda is writing this story and then she comes to learn that it's actually a true story about Miss Honey. Those songs, I guess because they didn't make sense to me, and they weren't that, and they were a bit, I don't know, just a bit kind of dour and sad and stuff, I don't listen to. When
they sounded very forgettable to me.
Well, I think there may be an element of that as well, but it's just because I didn't actually know the particulars of the story, so I didn't get them. The songs I was really looking forward to were School Song, which is where they sing. I mean, it's kind of a spoiler, because School Song, it's funny, School Song has a spoiler in it, which I kind of don't want to reveal, and I recommend people listen to it, because when I first listened to it, I didn't get what it was doing, and then there's a trick played halfway through, and then it's all revealed, and I thought, oh God, that's so clever, such clever lyrics. I was really looking forward to that. I was really looking forward to Bruce, which is where Bruce Bogtrotter eats the cake. Again, there's some really fun, just a lot of rhyming, a lot of funny rhyming. Revolting Children, which is what they sing towards the end, having defeated Miss Trunchbull. And The Smell of Rebellion, which is in this film where she takes them to do PE. It's called Phys Ed, and there's a reason for that. It's because Phys Ed helps, you can rhyme with it, basically. We don't actually call it in Phys Ed in this country. It's called PE, but whatever, you let it go. Also, I think, because Tim mentioned Australia, I think maybe they call it Phys Ed in Australia. Anyway, I was looking forward to these four, and for the most part, I was quite pleased, but they all have kind of very big production and big kind of choral backing from all the kids. And I found that quite lacking here, and I don't know if it's the screening we saw it at, or if it's actually how the soundtrack has been produced. But I don't know if you noticed the same thing, that the background was really muted and almost and kind of dipped out at one or 2 points, which made me think it was a screening issue, because I can't imagine you would let that get into the final film. I found that quite disappointing, because listening to the music to the stage musical soundtrack, they're big numbers and they end in these big ways.
They sounded better in your car than they did in the film. That's true.
We listened to them in the car on the way back. And the other thing that really disappointed me, and this goes to the spoilery elements of School Song, which I don't want to reveal, is when that trick is revealed in the second half of the song, I thought the staging of it was really poor, because in order to help you get the trick of it, you're shown things on screen, right? I'm talking quite vaguely, but you'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen the film. And what you're shown, I think, is not that imaginative, very, very one note. You could show what it needs to show in all sorts of different ways, through choreography, through all sorts of different setting. It doesn't do that very much. It's pretty, you just see doors, right? I thought that was really weak. I wanted so much more from that because that's such a good reveal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, visually, the film is so unbelievably pedestrian. There were certain things that offered such opportunities, right? The whole fantasy of the acrobat and the escape artist, right? You could see they'd gone some effort into the stage design, the costuming, and so. It just didn't look dazzling enough. It didn't look spectacular enough. There wasn't like an original shot, or an image that kind of stood out in all of that. The same thing, I think, with a chocolate cake sequence, right?
Yeah.
Having a red mist come out, that is not the most spectacular thing you can do in a cinema, right? In a movie. And then again, I also thought the thing with the chains at the end, right, which creates kind of this destructive phantom monster. Mm-hmm. There were so many visual possibilities with that, right? And I think the choices were very pedestrian. I mean, it wasn't necessarily bad. Like, you could see what they were trying to do. But it's just that what they were trying to do was not being communicated through potent images.
Yeah. I wonder how that looks on stage, because they can't be doing it exactly like that. They, from what I just read of the synopsis of the stage version, it does end with this spelling scene, the spelling test scene, and then all these multiple chokies, which, again, that wasn't from 96. She's built a chokey for every student, and then, Matilda gets the chalk to write on the board to reveal Miss Trunchbull's crime and so on, and to threaten her, which was there in 96 as well. Better done in 96. It worked much better there. As a kind of threat. But the central thing here that makes it that I think, they didn't do this on stage, or they can't have done it on stage, is the giant chain monster that Matilda builds to threaten, makes it the ghost of her dad to threaten Miss Trunchbull. I thought, like that's definitely something that they have to have done it just for this film, because you can do it on screen. And I didn't mind it at all. I thought it worked quite well. It made sense. It made a good climax out of the escapologist's acrobat story, and worked it in nicely. I thought that made sense. Actually, that was essentially an addition. Again, I'll have to keep saying this. I don't know if it was in the book, but it wasn't in the 96 version, this whole escapologist acrobat storytelling thing. And I think I thought it was worked in quite roughly for the most part. It was just one of those many disparate elements. But because I feel that all of the elements that are disparate here are worked in less coherently, I didn't mind the addition of it. You see what I mean? It didn't stand out as extra incoherent. It was just one of many things the film was juggling.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind the combining of all of those things. I was just kind of put off by the film being so visually uninteresting when the story itself offers so many possibilities, right, for that kind of spectacle. And I think the proof of the pudding in this is really the last sequence, right, where you have the camera pull out. You have the school now with an amusement park around it. And it's the most cliche-ish, stupid image of fake happiness that I've ever seen. Right? So,
and it's like this thing of what happiness looked like to kids in 1957.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I get, the film is set in the past, right? It's set in that era, and a lot of attention has been paid, I assume, to all that branding you see on the sweets of the time. So it's Curly Wurlies and Whatsits and Iron Brew, but all the packaging is, I assume, accurate to the time. Because it's definitely not modern packaging. And those things are kind of nice, but it does have this feeling. Mind you, it also reminded me of like Pink Floyd's The Wall, and I think this is not just particular to this film. I think there's something about, I think Roald Dahl, actually, generally speaking, has something of this in him as well, which is this idea of school as a kind of concentration camp is too heavy, but like there's definitely like a post-war hangover, like it's like a punishment camp, right? Where kids are sent to just be punished and kept in prison. And Pink Floyd's The Wall is like, it's all about that, and it's really potent and really rich, and obviously that's very different. It's not really for kids. But you definitely feel it here, and you feel it. I actually quite like the use of Trunchbull is like surveilling the school with all their cameras, which, you think, how accurate is that to the time? Well, it doesn't really matter. It's a really nice image, and I like it. Her introduction, I think, is actually really good. You hardly see her. She's shot just in like the half her face right to the camera, her hands on the controls, and it's gently, sort of gradually brought in. And actually, her introduction in the 96 version, when she's played by Pam Ferris, is really good as well. It does a similar sort of thing where she's first speaking to Mr. Wormwood, getting a car off him, and you see it in silhouette, and he's very small because he's Danny DeVito, and she's enormous because she's the terrifying Trunchbull. And then when she shows up in the playground, and all the kids have to be, dead silent and stand to attention, you just see shots of her, like, riding crop and her feet and stuff before you get the shot. It's quite an intimidating introduction. I think it was really... And actually, I do like the look of her. I like, you say, Emma Thompson is hardly recognisable. I didn't think so. I didn't know she played her in this. And when I saw her, I thought, oh, that's Emma Thompson. And I liked the way she looked. And I liked... The other thing is that the image of the Trunchbull that Pam Ferris played, to me, is iconic. Right, and I know iconic is a word that kids just use way too much these days, but it's a word that it has stuck with me forever. That is the image of her.
Well, Emma Thompson could have done it with her own face. I don't see why you have to use digital imaging on a star.
Well, I don't think she was. I think that looked to me clearly it was prosthetic.
I'm not sure
they've added to the face. But what I'm saying is that if I were, to reimagine Trunchbull. Is quite, to me, like a daunting idea because I have an image of it. It's like trying to reimagine Frankenstein's monster. And I like the way it was done here. Right, it made a new Trunchbull. I liked the way she was used. The one thing I didn't like, I don't know if you agree with this or not, is in the song where she's doing PE with the kids and torturing them. She goes on a flight of fancy where she imagines a world with no children, how happy she would be. And during that song, she is swinging on a swing happily, and she's wearing a white dress, and her hair's down, and she's got fairly heavy makeup.
Oh, it's a horrible image.
I thought it was really in bad taste, actually, because the joke of that bit shouldn't be that she's a joke of a woman, right? It doesn't do that with the rest of it. It doesn't make her overly masculine for the rest of the time, right? I think it's really unfair, actually. The joke is that you cut back to her in real life, swinging on a tyre swing, and the kid's going, wow, she's crazy. That's the joke, right? She's in a world of her own. I thought that was really in bad taste that they emphasised this lack of femininity to her, that if she tries to be a woman, she's a joke. I thought that was really bad.
Well, I thought there were so many bad things about it. You see, the thing is, this director had previously done Pride, which I love. And actually, the strengths of that were, I thought, the dramatic and political and the elements of acting, right? And I think you could see some of those strengths here because actually the only things I truly loved about this film are some of the performers. Though, again, I don't want to make too much out of the cinematic versus the theatrical, but I love Andrea Riseborough, with her very broad performance as the mother. I love the librarian. What's her name?
Sindhu V.
So I thought she was wonderful. And I also loved the school teacher, Miss Honey.
Oh, Lashana Lynch.
Yeah, who was just so warm and appealing and, and I did enjoy Emma Thompson, though I do think it's a mistake to make her visually unrecognizable. I recognize her instantly as well, but really through her voice, not through her face. So I couldn't understand why they'd cast a young girl. And, I was reading quickly on the wiki page and she said she gave a marvelous audition. I'm thinking, well, did she give a marvelous audition or did she do a marvelous screen test? Because they are different things. And I think the girl on camera is pretty uncharismatic. Like, I wouldn't say dead, but almost, yeah? Because she's not bad, she's just not appealing, right?
I kind of get what you mean, although I didn't like her at the start, but I think I was comparing her again to what I remembered of 96, and the fact that she was older, and I thought, there's something much more precocious about her now that I wasn't quite enjoying. But I started to like her, basically, as we went on. But I do know what you mean. She lacks a certain something.
Yeah, I mean, the film is her film, and, you need somebody more charismatic than that to carry it. I some of the numbers were appealing. I think that's the ones you mentioned, I liked a lot of the ethos of it or the thesis of it or, the naughtiness, the resistance, the making your own future that is not preordained. I kind of liked all of those elements of it, but, I kind of thought that they were altogether in in my view, a very poor film.
I'll tell you the actors I noted, which I didn't expect to, because I generally speaking think that British child actors are shit. And right at the start, actually, the girl who plays Lavender, her friend, was not very good. And I said to you, like, that's why in the other one they cast Americans. Because there is a thing in that film, like, it's all Americans, apart from Miss Trunchbull, who's English. And and I remember when I was watching it, I was thinking, oh, she's the original Super Nanny. Like, in America, I don't know if it's still on, but they loved Super Nanny. And it was this British nanny who came over and taught everyone discipline. You know? And it's like, it's Miss Trunchbull, right, from 96. Babe had something similar. It's supposed to be set in like the West Country or Cornwall or something, but everyone's American. It's like, it makes no sense whatsoever, but it didn't matter. It was a lovely film. Here, it's all English. And I thought, oh God, here we go. Right, English child actors. They're dreadful. But they weren't, right? So the kid who played Bruce Bogtrotter, I liked. I thought he had a bit of spunk and charm and all that sort of thing. I liked the girl who played, I guess she's a prefect, and she's kind of the one who's trying to terrify them, that the Trunchbulls.
I liked her, the one with the pink hair at the end.
Can't remember if her hair went pink, but she's the older one, right? Yeah. And there's a short song which was not on the musical soundtrack, so I was thrilled to have it in this, which is where they just talk about the chokey, where the kids get sent. There's nails and stuff, and it's it's a really really short song, but all the kids that know about the chokey, they're like climbing over the climbing frame. And in really creepy ways, like it looked like this kind of multi-limbed monster. It was really creepy just for a minute when they sang this. And the other kid I liked was the telekinesis kid.
Oh, I like him,
right? I thought, the moment he came on screen, I was like, this kid, fucking give him the whole film. I love him. I thought he was really charming, really lovely.
Yeah, well, there were some good ones, but the central one was a dud.
And also, when it comes to the look of the film, I, for the most part, agree with you. It's very pedestrian, very middle of the road. And I was looking for, how are the numbers going to be filmed, right? It's a musical. It's about the numbers. And I've already said, I object really to the way that School Song is shot and produced. I think it's a flop. It doesn't make enough of its hook. I did like Quiet, which is when the Trunchbull is coming at Matilda, and the camera starts swirling around her, and it's again very quick, complex lyrics, and things are getting faster and faster and louder inside her head. I thought that worked really, really nicely. Once you get into the clouds, it dies because then the song goes all quiet and everything. But for that building up, it really, really worked. I mean,
there were some interesting ideas, and you could see that they paid attention. So, for example, with the choreography, you were conscious that they were trying to make choreography for the camera, right? It just wasn't very well realized.
Yeah. So when the kids are dancing towards the camera at the end, when they've defeated Trunchbull, I liked, as you say, it was there for the camera. They were coming towards the camera, that everyone was acting in kind of blocked and staged for the camera. And I was surprised by the dancing, actually. It's very heavily cut, and it's not really the focus of it so much as because it's all about the school spilling out and this chaos that everyone's won. So I don't object to the fact you don't see very much of it. But what you did see, I was really surprised by. I liked it was especially that older girl, the prefect girl. I'm assuming she was. She's a really good dancer, and it was really unusually. It felt like, I don't know dance all that well, right? But it felt like quite modern, and all these kind of sharp, jerky movements I really enjoyed.
Well, I thought the numbers were poorly choreographed, right? All those, so the kids, you had them jumping on chairs and jumping on tables and jumping out of chairs. And again, I thought there was an attempt to make it cinematic. Often there was an overhead camera or, but actually it wasn't, to me, contributing anything to the feel of the song or what the film was kind of communicating. It wasn't an element in conjunction with the orchestrator, with the others to push this number or to convey this number. So, I thought it was poor.
The issue I have with Revolting Children generally, and I'm surprised to find that this is something that is true of the musical as well, the stage musical, because I was reading the synopsis, is the lyrics of that song are about, we can spell how we want, we don't have to listen to the Trunchbull, we can fight, and we're revolting children living in revolting times, right? So, a pun on revolting. It's song about revolution. And it comes after they've won, which was, it was really weird to me, and I thought, have they moved it? And because it should come before, to me, it's always sounded like a building up to the battle song, and it comes after as a triumph song. It was just really weird to me. Like, you don't have the victory and then have a revolution. So I just thought that was weird. I like the song still though.
That element is also to me a sign of, the cinematic and poverty of the film. Because, that moment where they bring down the statue of Miss Trunchbull, it's obviously meant to evoke those statues of Lenin and Stalin, that kind
Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, Saddam Hussein, all of those things, And so you instantly get that reference, right? But actually what's not being communicated is how the children might feel liberated or changed or, to make a dramatic image of that moment, right? So... yeah, that's it. I want to ask you one thing, because one of the things, that a friend said is that one of the things she hated about this film is how snobby it was. Did you find it snobby?
Oh, that's interesting. It definitely... I was thinking about this. Again, I was thinking about this in some way with the 96 film. Because Matilda's family are coded essentially as lower class and thick, right? And in the 96 film, there's a huge amount of emphasis on the family life, much more than there is here. And which is, I really like it. It works so well for the 96 film, and it just makes so much more sense of Matilda's story, really. Here, it's all about the school, to the point where the fight at the end of this with Trunchbull and the chalk and scaring her into leaving is relocated to the school here. Whereas in the 96 film, that's all about Trunchbull's home life, and it happens in her home, right? So there was, it's an indication of how the emphasis is different. It's all about the school life here, much more so. And the thing is, in the 96 film, it's all about, watching the telly, not reading books. You have the same scene of him ripping up the book from the library. All of this, like, they're incredibly cruel, and they kind of revel in their stupidity. But there's something about it that feels
a critique of American culture in that film. I read it, that way.
There's certainly that, but I was going to say it feels like we still like that family, right? We kind of accept them, and we know ultimately that, I guess, Matilda's going to win out in the end. And ultimately what that film has is an incredible respect for knowledge. And, when he rips up the book, that's not, it's like it's an awful thing to do. Same as it is here. Yeah. It's an awful thing to do, and you can't do it, and it's the wrong thing and everything. And that film is all about the respect for knowledge. And that film ends with a shot of Matilda and Miss Honey at home together reading Moby Dick, right, I think. So that's the whole kind of key. Here, I think what you get less of with the parents is a feeling of how, like, their lives might be valuable or might be happy or that kind of thing. That I can't think how to phrase it, but it feels less kind to the parents.
Yes, I think here they are very much a working class caricature. There's something Essex about them.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we were listening to a couple of the songs, as we said, on the way back from the cinema, and you can hear it, their Cockney accents in it, right? Whereas all the kids are these kind of quite refined sort of Londony accents, which I think back when we saw Paddington 2, I was like, kids do not fucking talk like this. They're vicious and they're nasty and they have accents and stuff. That's just how kind of British cinema wants its children to be seen, apparently. Or well, I say British cinema, that's a big term. A certain kind of British cinema. I think it's basically, snobby is a word I agree with, right? It has an element of that, and I don't like it. And I think there is a way of communicating, kind of what those parents are like without looking down on them so much. But to some degree, they should be looked down on to a certain degree. They don't have any respect for knowledge. They don't have any respect for literature. They don't have any respect for the fact that their little girl is incredibly special and needs support and could, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're selfish and they're scammers and thieves, but they are also the only lower middle class element in the film.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it is an issue.
Yeah. Because, the thing is, it's, with Roald Dahl, it's not like you want the parents to be treated nicely. Parents are there to be got back at, and they are nasty caricatures. And from the kid's perspective, everyone hates their parents, right? And that's what he's giving you. So I don't mind that. I don't mind the kind of villainy. But you're right, they are the one That is exactly the right thing. They are the one lower or working class element, and they are looked down upon. They're scum.
It was the number one film in the country in its opening week, replacing Wakanda Forever or whatever it's called. Yeah, the sequel to Black Panther. Why do you think that is? Because I do think it's a very poor film.
You have to remember that the stage musical is incredibly popular.
Yeah.
5-star reviews, went to Broadway. Like I say,
I tried to get tickets for years and I couldn't get tickets.
Right, so it's massive. So there's a huge element of that. So you're bringing the biggest play to cinema screens, right? I think there's a huge element of that. And you know, we've been critical all throughout. There's a lot about the film I enjoyed. My overall impression of the film, I enjoyed it.
Wow.
I think a huge amount of that is based on the fact I think the songs are really good.
I don't think they're good.
I think they're well written, clever songs. I like Tim Minchin's writing. I like his lyrics. I think he's a very clever lyricist. I
was predicting all his rhymes.
But there's a lot of them, you know, and I like how many there are, and I like I know some of the songs because I listen to them in the car so much, right? It's a kind of writing that I really like, very incessant rhyming, sort of thing, and quite quick lyrics. Well, like I say, the songs that are like that are the ones I like. The songs that aren't like that, I don't listen to very much. They're less interesting to me. So I think that's a huge part of it, and it's big, colourful. You take your kids to it. I mean,
yeah, the kids enjoyed it.
Yeah, there were kids in the cinema. They were having a good time.
I found it dull.
I think it's much worse than the 96 one. I mean, I said at the start I shouldn't compare it too much, and it's all I've done, but fuck it, that's the way I feel.
That's the way it is.
That's the way it is, and no, it's funny, when I was watching the 96 one last night, one of the first things I thought was, wow, this is well directed. Much better than... Because you don't know what a film being well directed is when you're 10 years old. And now I watch it and I'm 34... And I recognise, no, this is so much better than it needs to be to entertain children. You know, it really stands up. There's such an expressive, exciting use of camera. Danny DeVito, as a performer in it, is so much fun to watch.
Yes.
And Danny DeVito, I think, is never happier than when he's playing like a real scumbag. I mean, you see it in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The shit he gets to do in that, he loves it. You know, yes. And he gets to be that in this. And there's so much attitude and energy in it and this film is lacking all of that. It's trying to do different things. So fair enough, but it sings.
But also, to me, it's the poorest of the Roald Dahl adaptations that I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chocolate Factory films, particularly the Tim Burton version, it's quite wonderful to see, even though actually it got pretty bad reviews when it came out. But I think, compared to this, it's a cinematic masterpiece. I love The Witches, the original film of The Witches.
I didn't know there was a film of it.
Yeah, it is, with Angelica Houston.
Okay.
Actually, it's even been remade with... Who was Anne Hathaway, the remake of it.
Really?
Yeah, but the original with Angelica Houston is brilliant.
Okay.
So, I think this is the weakest of the ones I can remember seeing.
Right, Nick Rogue directed it.
Yeah.
How interesting. 1990. I did not know that. There's obviously the Gene... Charlie and Chocolate Factory. Gene, what's his name?
I know who you mean. He was in Young Frankenstein and so on.
Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder, yes.
Which, again, that was a big part. Yeah, I watched that a lot when I was a little kid, and that remains. And again, full of Americans. But
it's wonderful.
But it's one of those things. It's just America took the film, put it full of Americans, and it's absolutely lovely and fun. That still get. I mean, there's a GIF of that which keeps getting used today. It's like it remains sort of in the public, in the cultural consciousness. James and the Giant Peach had a release in 96 as well, which was directed by Henry Selick, stop motion, and that was really good.
Yes.
I loved that. I don't think I made it to the end of the Steven Spielberg adaptation of the BFG. I thought that was really shit. Maybe I need to give it a second go, but I thought it was ponderous and slow.
But my God, again, it has to be much more interesting than this.
Maybe not. Maybe it is just that boring. I mean,
Maybe. So, I'm looking at other film Revolting Rhymes. I've not seen
I read,
that.
Yeah, well, Revolting... Is that a film? They did a film with Revolting Rhymes. That was a book of poetry, which I really liked. There was a poem in it about how Americans say can't and we say can't, and then he made rhymes out of it. I can't remember how it goes.
The Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Of course, yeah.
Which is wonderful. So there you go. Anyway.
I like Roald Dahl, and he's been kind of reevaluated in recent years for anti-Semitism or perceived anti-Semitism. It seems, if you read about it on Wikipedia, it seems a little bit up in the air. It seems like partially it's anti-Israel, partially it's anti-Semitic, and partially it seems like he's just trying to get a rise out of people. You actually can't really tell, I think.
Yes.
And a few other things, but...
He was a difficult person, ostensibly, so...
Seems to be. And I remember, because I also read some of his more adult-oriented stuff when I was a little kid. There was did he write that short story called Skin, where the guy gets his tattoo on his back, and he gets it skinned and framed or something? It was creepy. And and he did a story about, I think it's quite a famous one. I think a woman murders her husband with a leg of lamb that she's got frozen in the freezer, and then the detectives come round and she's cooked it and feeds it to them. And she gets away with her crime. And there was one which I think was he was telling a true story about his youth, where he said he was 9 or 10 years old, and he had adenoids, and he really vividly writes about them getting cut out with like a curved blade with no anaesthetic and all this.
Right.
And it was, I mean, you really feel like the way he was treated by his parents, the way they would, do things in anaesthetic, the way the doctor would just go, okay, here we go, here comes out the roof of your mouth, snip, snip, and the pain and all that, you like really feel like, that is so informed, the way he's writing for children, I mean, the cruelty that's so present in there.
Yes. I never read his books because, my parents are Spanish. So the first time I ever heard of him was as Patricia Neal's husband. He was husband to a big American movie star, and she had a stroke at one point, and ostensibly he helped heal her back to speaking and walking and so on. And they made a film of it with Glenda Jackson and Dirk Bogarde, a television film in the 1980s, which was very, very popular. And, that's the first thing I've ever heard about Roald Dahl until I came to England.
Yeah, well, he's quite a big figure still. And the other thing, I guess, that's quite notable that's been reevaluated about his work is the Oompa Loompas in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the kind of the racial stereotypes that they kind of use / evoke.
Yes.
And again, you think how much of it is personal prejudice, how much of it is cultural prejudice, that this is just the way we see the foreigners. Yeah, again, it's kind of difficult. And and it's one of those things where you feel like you definitely shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater with this stuff, because his books are still fantastic. They really are. I think we do need to look at the past in those ways, actually, But I also think we need to do it in light of the present, because one of the things that always strikes me is the extraordinary racism in British culture, which is kind of a different kind than you see in America. But for example, the really patronizing attitudes in British cultural works towards the figure of the American, as if they're just coarse, stupid, uneducated, speaks a kind of an imperial attitude to the rest of the world, right? So if that's the way that you look at the biggest power of the 20th century, imagine how you look at all the others, right? The thing is, when you were the biggest power of the 19th century, and you see that getting destroyed in front of your very eyes, you have to look at the next one comes along and try to make yourself feel better by, by talking them down. But what shows the American imperial power better than them taking those stories, putting Americans in them, and making them much better than they would be if we were making them?
I don't know. But anyway, we should wrap this up. I think, to me, I'm very glad I saw it, because I really loved some of the actors in it. But aside from that, it was a very disappointing film. And as a musical, it's nul point.
Well, I still like the songs, and I'm going to listen to half the soundtrack on the way home. I'm still not going to listen to the songs that are a bit boring. But I'll listen to all the ones with fast lyrics, because I like them. I really trust everyone who says it was brilliant on stage. Nice. I can imagine being so full of energy in life and all that stuff.
We should go see a stage show. Tickets are easier to get now.
Yeah, it might be nice. And it would be all of that life-affirming stuff that you feel at the end of a play, where you go, somehow there's still something in this world left to live for. I bet it's got that. This film doesn't. Yeah. It's not quite good enough, really. But I did like it. Fuck it, No.
All right. Well, thank you.
There are worse things to show you kids.
Yes. Oh, for sure. On that note, Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. I should actually quickly add, when we're talking about the parents and the snobbishness and everything, there are 2 songs from the stage show that I know were cut out because they're on the soundtrack for it. One of them's called Telly, and it's sung by the dad, and it's all about how watching telly is much better than reading books. And there's a song called Loud, which is sung by the mum, and it's all about how looking pretty is much more important for a girl than having knowledge, right? And so it's interesting that although there's definitely a huge snobbish element to the way they're portrayed here, those 2 songs, which would exacerbate that, emphasise it, are not present here.
Yeah.
I think that's a function of the fact they're just toning down the amount of family story that's in it. You know, I mean, when you're adapting to a film, you're always finding stuff to cut, and I think they've just decided this can be cut here. So it's interesting. They're there. They make it worse, and they're there in the stage show.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you.